Good day, family, and welcome to today's video. Before we start, let me know what time and place you're watching from. You don't know, we might give you a shout out in our next video. I've been a long-haul trucker for over 15 years, mostly running freight up and down the Dalton Highway in Alaska. I've seen my share of blizzards, moose crossings, and bone-deep cold that could kill you faster than a bullet. But nothing ever shook me quite like what happened on a January run back in 2018. I still think about that night every time I see the frost creep on my windshield. I was hauling fuel from Fairbanks to Prudhoe Bay, about a 12-hour drive if the weather behaved, which it never does that time of year. The road was slick and snow was coming down hard. My CB radio crackled on and off with truckers warning each other about icy patches and stalled rigs. The temperature was hovering around -30, and even inside the cab, my breath fogged up the glass. I remember stopping for coffee at Coldfoot around midnight. The place was nearly empty except for 2 other truckers and a waitress who looked half asleep. I chatted with a guy named Ron, who said he'd seen a wreck near mile 219, an overturned pickup, no one inside. He said the police had been called, but never showed up. I figured maybe they towed it out later, but that detail would come back to haunt me. After topping off, I hit the road again. The snow had eased a little, but visibility was still poor. The Dalton is mostly wilderness, no lights, no houses, just endless darkness and the hum of your own engine. You start hearing things in your head out there, like phantom voices on the wind. The whiteouts mess with your sense of distance too. About 40 miles north, I caught sight of a faint light on the shoulder ahead. I slowed down, thinking maybe another truck had broken down. As I got closer, I saw it wasn't a truck at all. It was a small silver pickup half buried in snow, headlights flickering weakly. The driver's door was open, and the interior light glowed like a weak candle in the storm. I pulled over and killed my engine. The silence was so heavy I could hear the snow hitting my jacket when I stepped out. I called out, no answer. I shone my flashlight inside. The keys were still in the ignition, a thermos on the seat, and a jacket tossed on the floor. But no footprints leading away, just the wind sweeping the snow over everything like a blanket. Something about it fell off. I'd seen accidents before, but not like this. Usually, there's some sign of struggle or someone waiting for help. Here, it looked like whoever was driving just vanished into thin air. I took down the plate number to report it at the next stop and climbed back into my rig. That's when I noticed something strange. In my side mirror, the truck's own taillights cast a faint red glow on the snow behind me. And for a second, I swear I saw a shadow moving across it. Human-shaped, but too fast. I turned around, but there was nothing there. Just blowing snow. I told myself I was tired, that I was seeing things. I rolled back onto the highway, trying to shake the unease. But maybe 20 minutes later, I felt it again. That prickling on the back of my neck, the sense that someone was in the cab with me. You know that feeling when you know you're being watched, but you can't explain why? I checked the mirrors again. Nothing but the reflection of my own headlights bouncing off the snow. Then came the whisper. I still can't say for sure if it was real, but I heard it clear as day. A low voice, right behind me, saying my name. Derek. I froze. The cab went dead silent, like the air itself had thickened. My hand hovered over the CB mic, but I didn't press it. I just kept staring at the windshield, waiting for something to happen. Then, as suddenly as it came, the voice was gone. I kept driving, refusing to pull over. Hours passed like that. The road, the snow, my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. But at mile 243, I had to stop again. My truck's temperature gauge spiked, and I knew I'd blow the engine if I pushed it. I coasted into a turnout, killed the ignition, and stepped out to check the radiator. That's when I saw them, footprints in the snow. Not mine, fresh ones, circling my truck like someone had been walking around it while I was driving. I backed up slowly, flashlight trembling in my hand. The prints were deep, crisp, and led off into the dark toward the tree-line. I followed them, maybe 10 feet before they just stopped. No sign of where they went. No drag marks, no collapse. Just gone. I got back in the cab, locked both doors, and sat there with the engine idling. I didn't sleep, didn't move. Around dawn, I finally made it to Dead Horse. I dropped my load, signed the papers, and told the station manager what I'd seen. He looked at me funny and said, "You sure it was around mile 243? I nodded. Then he told me something that made my stomach turn. The guy from that wrecked silver pickup. They never found him. Search teams looked for days, but there were no tracks, no body, nothing. The only thing they ever found was one of his gloves, frozen stiff about half a mile from the road. I don't know what I saw that night, or who, but every winter since, when I drive that same stretch, I still see flashes of movement in my mirrors. Once, I even heard the CB crackle with a faint voice calling my name again. Sometimes I wonder if maybe he froze out there and never moved on. Or maybe something else walks that road when the snow gets deep enough to swallow the sound of your own thoughts. I stopped taking solo runs after that. I told people it was because of my back, but the truth is, I just couldn't handle the silence anymore. There's something about those empty miles between Fairbanks and Prudhoe that feels wrong. Like the land remembers what happened, even if you try to forget. I still drive sometimes, short hauls mostly, but when the snow starts falling and the wind cuts across the highway, I roll down my window and listen. And every now and then, just before dawn, I swear I hear footsteps crunching in the snow beside my rig, keeping pace just out of sight. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more true trucker experiences from the icy roads of Alaska, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And if you've ever had something strange happen out there on the highway, tell me about it in the comments below. You might just hear your story in the next video. I don't usually talk about this, but every time I pull into a lonely truck stop, I still catch myself checking the mirrors twice before stepping out. This happened about 3 winters ago, somewhere between Anchorage and Talk. My name's Frank, and I've been driving rigs for a little over 20 years. I've seen blizzards so thick you couldn't see your own headlights, moose standing in the middle of the road like statues, and ice so clear it looked like glass. But this one night, it wasn't the weather that scared me. It was the man I met at a truck stop off the Glen Highway. It was late January, temperatures dropping below -30. I've been running a haul of frozen goods northbound and decided to stop at a place called Frosthaven Truck Stop. It was the kind of joint that looked half abandoned. 2 pumps, a flickering neon sign, and a small diner that smelled like burnt coffee and diesel. I was exhausted and figured I'd grab a bite and a couple hours of shut-eye before finishing the run. Inside, the place was quiet except for a guy sitting in the corner booth, staring out the window. He had this heavy parka on, fur hood pulled low, and his plate of food looked untouched. The waitress, a middle-aged woman named Ruth, poured me coffee and said most drivers had been staying off the highway because of the storm rolling in. She also mentioned that the man in the corner had been there since early afternoon. Barely said a word, she told me. Just sits there and watches the lot. I glanced over. The guy didn't move, didn't even blink. I figured maybe he was waiting for a tow or another driver. Nothing unusual. Truckers help each other out all the time. After dinner, I went back to my rig, parked to the far end of the lot. Snow had started falling again, and the wind cut through my jacket like knives. I climbed into the sleeper, pulled the curtain, and fired up the heater. Outside, I could hear the occasional whine of tires on ice as a few lay haulers passed by. The night felt endless. Sometime around midnight, I woke up to the sound of knocking. Not loud, just a slow, steady tap 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 on my door. I froze. Every driver knows that sound. Someone knocking on your cab at night, in the middle of nowhere, means trouble 9 times out of 10. I sat up, heart racing. I called out, "Who's there?" No answer, just another tap tap. I leaned forward, wiped the frost off the window, and peered out. At first, I saw nothing but swirling snow in my headlights. Then I noticed a figure standing by my door. Short, heavy coat, hood up, face shadowed. "Hey, what do you need?" I shouted. The man didn't speak. He just stood there, staring. I grabbed my flashlight, opened the curtain a little more, and shone the beam toward him. The light caught his face, chapped skin, hollow eyes, lips cracked from cold. He looked like the same guy from the diner. I opened the window an inch and said, "You okay, man? You need a ride or something?" That's when he smiled. Just a small, twisted grin that didn't reach his eyes. Then, without a word, he turned and walked away into the snow. I waited, expecting him to go back toward the diner, but he didn't. He just disappeared behind the fuel pumps. I watched for a minute longer, then pulled the curtain shut. Maybe he was drunk or high. Maybe he needed help but didn't know how to ask. I tried to go back to sleep, but every creak of the truck made me flinch. About an hour later, I woke up again. Not from noise this time, from silence. My engine had stopped. I knew I'd left it idling to keep the heater running, but now the cab was freezing. I checked the ignition. Nothing. Dead. That's when I heard footsteps outside. Slow, crunching footsteps moving around my truck. I reached for my flashlight again, but my hand was shaking so bad I dropped it. The beam flickered across the floor before dying. I sat still, barely breathing. The footsteps circled the truck once, then stopped near the passenger side. I listened. Nothing. Just the wind. Then, faintly, I heard the sound of metal scraping against metal like someone dragging a key or a knife along the side of my rig. That broke me. I slammed the horn, hoping to scare whoever it was away. The sound echoed through the empty lot. A few lights flicked on inside the diner, and I saw Ruth come to the window. When I climbed down from the cab, flashlight back in hand, whoever had been there was gone. But I wasn't imagining it. There were prints all around the truck, fresh and deep, and long scratch marks along the passenger door. Ruth ran out with her coat half on. I told her what happened, and she said the man from earlier had left the diner hours ago. He'd asked about a driver hauling frozen goods north me. That's when my stomach dropped. You told him my route. I asked. She looked confused. I thought you two were friends. He said he was supposed to ride with you. We called the state troopers, but it took them nearly 2 hours to arrive through the snow. They checked the lot, the surrounding woods. Nothing. The tracks vanished halfway toward the tree line, same as if he'd been lifted right off the ground. The trooper asked me to describe the man. I told him what I saw. Short, cracked face, parka with fur hood. The trooper frowned and said, "You sure about that parka? We found one like it 2 weeks ago off the talk cutoff. Belonged to a trucker named Bill Mason. He froze to death after his rig broke down in the storm." I thought he was joking, but he wasn't. Bill's rig had been discovered about 60 miles from there. They said he'd been trying to walk for help when the cold got him. The body was already buried under snow when they found him. I didn't know what to say. The man I saw looked alive. Pale and cold, sure, but alive. He knocked on my door. He smiled at me. He scratched my truck. The trooper told me to get my engine checked before continuing north, but when I turned the key, it roared to life on the first try, like nothing had happened. I drove straight to talk without stopping again. I didn't even look in my mirrors. By the time I reached the way station, the scratches on the passenger door were gone. I mean it. They just weren't there. A few days later, Ruth called me. She said the state troopers had come back to question her. Apparently, she wasn't the only one who'd seen that man hanging around the stop. Other drivers had reported him too. Always alone, always asking where certain trucks were headed, but no one ever saw him leave. I tried to brush it off, but a week later, I found something under my passenger seat while cleaning the cab. A thermos, old, metal, with the name Bill M. scratched on the bottom. I didn't keep it. I tossed it into a dumpster behind a warehouse in Anchorage. But that night, when I climbed into bed at the motel, I woke up around 3 a.m. to the sound of my truck horn blaring by itself in the parking lot. When I went out, the door on the passenger side was open. Snow had blown inside, covering the seat like a white sheet. I sold that rig 2 months later. Got a new one, changed routes, tried to forget. But every winter, when I pull into some lonely stop and see a single man sitting in the corner of a diner, staring out the window, I remember Frost Haven. And I make sure my doors stay locked. Because sometimes, out here in the Alaskan dark, not everyone you meet wants a ride. Some just want to find their way back to the road they never finished. I've been driving trucks across Alaska for most of my adult life, and I've always said the worst thing about the Dalton Highway isn't the cold, it's the silence. That kind of silence messes with your head. You start hearing things, thinking things. I used to laugh about it, but one night, I learned that some sounds don't come from your imagination. It was February 2020, and I was hauling construction materials from Fairbanks to a site near Nooksut. My name's Carl, and I was running solo. Most drivers avoid that route in midwinter, but the pay was good, and I figured I could handle it. I had my thermos of coffee, my CB radio tuned to channel 19, and the road stretched ahead like a frozen ribbon. The first few hours were smooth. The northern lights danced across the sky, green and silent. It felt almost peaceful, but around 2 a.m., the weather turned ugly fast. Heavy snow came down so thick my high beams turned it into a white wall. The wind howled, shaking the mirrors, and my wipers struggled to keep up. I slowed to 30, then 20. I could barely see the road markings. That's when the CB crackled to life. "Breaker 19, anyone got a copy?" The voice was faint, full of static, but it was definitely another driver. I grabbed the mic. "Go ahead, driver. You're coming in weak, but I got you." Nothing, just more static. Then, "You see the rig up ahead?" I frowned. "Negative, I don't see anyone. You stuck out here." No reply. The channel went dead again. I figured maybe it was another truck somewhere behind me. Sometimes the radio catches signals that bounce off the snow clouds, even from miles away. A few minutes later, I noticed something odd in my mirror's taillights. Faint, red, maybe 100 yards back. I hadn't seen another vehicle for hours, but there they were, glowing through the snow. I picked up the mic again. "Hey driver, that you behind me?" The radio hissed, then the same voice said, "Yeah, been following you since Coldfoot. You mind if I tag along? Roads are rough tonight." "Sure," I said. "Just keep a safe distance. I'm slowing to 15 till visibility improves." "Appreciate it," he said. His voice was calm, steady, sounded like an older guy. Not many folks running this route anymore. We chatted off and on for the next hour, just trucker talk. He said his name was Mike, and that he was hauling parts for an oil company. His voice was comforting in the storm. Talking kept me awake, but then something strange happened. The taillights behind me disappeared. 1 minute they were there, the next, nothing but darkness and blowing snow. I called over the CB. "Mike, you still there?" No answer, just static. I tried again. "Breaker 19, you copy?" After a few seconds, the radio crackled again. "Keep going. Don't stop." The voice was sharper now, faster. "What do you mean, don't stop?" I asked. "Don't stop the truck, no matter what." I gripped the wheel tighter. "What's going on?" Static again, then silence. I wanted to believe it was interference, but my gut said otherwise. I drove on for another mile before I saw movement through the snow. A dim light ahead. I thought it might be another rig pulled over, maybe even Mike. But as I got closer, I saw the shape of a truck, dark blue cab, trailer jackknife it across the road. Hazard lights flashing. I slowed down, stopping about 20 feet away. The snow was thick, swirling around like smoke. I grabbed my flashlight, stepped out, and fought through the wind toward the cab. The driver's door was open, swinging back and forth. The engine was dead silent. "Hello," I shouted. No answer. I climbed up on the step and shone my light inside. Empty. The seatbelt hung loose, keys still in the ignition. The radio was on, hissing static. On the dashboard, I saw a name tag clipped to a company jacket. My car. That made my stomach drop. I stumbled back to my rig, slammed the door, and turned the heater to full blast. I tried the CB again. "Mike, if you can hear me, I found your truck." The radio popped. Then his voice came through, clear, calm, and too close. "Told you not to stop." My heart nearly stopped. The voice didn't sound like it was coming from the radio anymore. It sounded like it was inside the cab. I looked around, shining the flashlight into every corner. Nothing. Just my gear, my thermos, my logbook. But then I noticed something else. The radio wasn't even on. The switch was off. I sat there frozen for what felt like forever. Finally, I forced myself to start driving again. The road was slick, but I didn't care. I just wanted out of there. The storm began to ease as dawn approached. The snow lightened, and I could see the faint outline of mountains in the distance. My hands had stopped shaking, and I started to think maybe I'd hallucinated the whole thing. Sleep deprivation, stress. Truckers see weird stuff when they're tired. When I reached the supply station near Nooksut, I went straight to the dispatch office and told the foreman what I'd seen. He got real quiet and asked me to repeat the name. "My car," I said. "Blue cab, jackknife a trailer." The foreman leaned back and rubbed his face. "You sure about that name?" "Positive," I said. "I saw it on the jacket." He stared at me for a long time, then said, "Mike Reynolds died on that highway last winter. Lost control in a whiteout, slid off an embankment. They didn't find him until spring thaw. I thought he was messing with me, but he wasn't. He showed me a photo on his phone. Same man, same truck, same company logo. I didn't say another word. I just left, unloaded my cargo, and headed back south. But the story doesn't end there. A week later, while hauling a new load toward Anchorage, I had the CB on again. Clear skies, no snow, broad daylight. Out of habit, I flipped to channel 19. It was quiet for a while, then the speaker hissed and I heard it again. "Breaker 19, you see the rig up ahead?" I dropped the mic and pulled to the shoulder. The radio was off. I haven't used a CB since. Every winter, when I pass that stretch of road near mile 178, I still see the marks in the snow where that blue rig must have gone off the side. They say the Dalton keeps its dead close. Maybe some drivers just don't realize they're done driving yet. I don't know what I heard that night, or who I was talking to, but I can tell you this. When you're out there alone in the storm and your radio crackles with a friendly voice, make sure you know where it's coming from, because sometimes the road talks back. If you enjoyed this story and want more true trucker horror stories from Alaska's frozen highways, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And if you've ever heard something strange on your CB or seen something you can't explain, tell me in the comments below. You might just hear your story next. Good day, family, and welcome to today's video. Before we start, let me know what time and place you're watching from. You never know, we might give you a shout out in our next video. Now, this story still gives me chills whenever I think about it. My name's Tommy. I've been a trucker for almost 20 years. I've seen my share of strange things while hauling freight through Alaska's frozen roads, but nothing like what happened on the Dalton Highway last winter. It was mid-January, the kind of cold that cracks your lips and freezes your eyelashes. I was hauling diesel fuel up to Prudhoe Bay, driving a 2018 Kenworth with tire chains that sang against the ice. Most nights, I rode alone, just me, the radio, and miles of white silence. That night, I started from Fairbanks around 9 p.m. The dispatcher warned me about a snow squall near Coldfoot, said visibility might drop fast. I wasn't too worried. I'd done this run 100 times. But around midnight, the wind began to scream. It wasn't the usual Alaskan gusts either. This one had a sharp, human-like whine, the kind that makes you lower the volume on the radio just to make sure it's really the wind. By 12:30, the road vanished under thick snow. I slowed down to 30, leaning forward on the wheel. My headlights lit nothing but white, flakes flying like sand in a storm. Then, through the swirling snow, I saw a shape up ahead. At first, I thought it was a moose. They wander onto the highway all the time. But as I got closer, I realized it was a man standing dead center of the road. He wore no reflective gear, no jacket, just a dark parka and jeans, both dusted with snow. His hands hung loose by his sides, and his head tilted slightly down like he was listening. I slammed on the brakes, my trailer fishtailing behind me, metal chains rattling like bones. The man didn't move. My heart hammered so hard I could hear it in my ears. I flicked my high beams at him, hoping he'd step aside, but he didn't. So I grabbed my radio mic. Dispatch, this is truck 42. I got a pedestrian on the Dalton, about 15 miles south of Coldfoot. Looks like he's in trouble. Static answered me. I tried again. Nothing. When I looked back up, the man was gone. Just gone. No footprints. No shadow. Nothing. The wind howled louder. I pressed my foot back on the gas, trying to tell myself maybe I'd imagined him. Snow and darkness played tricks on tired eyes. But about 10 minutes later, I saw something that made my stomach twist. Up ahead, through the snow, my headlights caught a figure walking on the right shoulder. The same man, same clothes, same posture. I slowed again, rolled my window down a crack, and yelled, "Hey, you okay? Need a ride?" He didn't answer. He just stopped walking and turned his head toward me. The light hit his face, and I swear I saw ice crystals stuck to his skin like glass shards. His eyes looked pale, almost milky white, like he'd been staring into the wind too long. That's when my radio crackled. "Truck 42, you copy?" I jumped, nearly dropped the mic. "Yeah, I'm here." "This is dispatch. We got your signal cutting out. You said something about a man on the road." I glanced out the window again. The shoulder was empty. My voice shook. Forget it. Must have been nothing. But I knew what I'd seen. As I kept driving, the storm got worse. The snow piled high on the windshield, and every gust felt like it wanted to push me off the road. I finally pulled over near Gobbler's Knob, turned on my hazard lights, and killed the engine for a minute to rest. Inside the cab, the silence pressed against me. The only sound was the faint ticking of the engine cooling down. Then came a knock. 3 slow, heavy knocks on my driver's door. I froze. I hadn't seen any headlights behind me. No vehicles for miles. I leaned forward, my breath fogging the glass, and peeked out the side mirror. Someone was standing just outside the light beam, close enough to touch the truck. For a long second, they didn't move. Then, In the red blink of my hazard lights, I saw him, the man from the road. I fumbled for my flashlight and pointed it toward the window, but before the beam hit, the knocking stopped. I threw open the door, and the night was empty. Just swirling snow and the hiss of wind against metal. I climbed down, scanned the snow. No footprints, no marks, nothing. Just untouched powder. My nerves were shot. I jumped back into the cab, locked the doors, and started the engine again. The moment I did, the radio came alive with static and a faint voice beneath it. "Tommy, turn back." I froze. That's my name. Turn back. I yanked the plug out of the CB, heart pounding, palms slick with sweat. I didn't wait. I drove. Fast. When I finally reached Coldfoot Camp, it was past 3 a.m. I pulled into the lot and rushed inside the cafe, shaking so hard the waitress asked if I was okay. I told her what I'd seen, the man on the road, the knocking, the voice. She went pale. Then she said, "You're not the first trucker to see him." According to her, about 10 years ago, a driver froze to death near Adigan Pass after his rig broke down. They found him standing outside his truck, eyes wide open, like he'd been trying to wave someone down. Folks say, during heavy snow, he shows up on the Dalton, looking for help that never came. I didn't believe in ghost stories before that night, but when I went back to my truck, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. On my driver's door, just below the window, were 3 fresh handprints, frozen into the ice. I tried scraping them off, but the mark stayed until morning. I finished my delivery at Prudhoe Bay, but I swear I never drove that road at night again. Every time the wind howls just right, I hear that faint knock in my head. And sometimes when I check my mirrors, I catch a dark shape walking just at the edge of my lights. Far enough to doubt, close enough to remember. I still wonder if he's out there, that lost trucker, waiting for someone to stop. I've worked as a tow driver in Alaska for nearly 15 years. Winters out here can chew you up and spit you out if you're not careful. But I've always told myself, every stranded trucker deserves a chance to make it home. That belief kept me going until the night I got the call from mile 212 on the Dalton Highway. It was late January, around 1:30 a.m., when the radio cracked through the quiet of my garage in Living Good. Unit 7, we've got a fuel hauler broke down about 20 miles north of your position. Driver's name's Greg Halpern. Says his rig's dead and his heat's out. I scribbled the details on a notepad and grabbed my parka. The temperature outside was 20 below zero, and the wind came in hard from the Yukon River. I'd done dozens of these calls before, but something about the dispatcher's tone felt uneasy. When I radioed back to confirm, she paused before replying, "Be careful, Nate. That stretch has been acting strange tonight. Other drivers reported radio interference around there." I didn't think much of it. The Dalton eats radios all the time during storms. Still, I packed an extra flask of coffee and an emergency kit, old habits. By 2 a.m., I was northbound on the highway, the snow crunching under my tires, the darkness pressing tight against the windshield. My tow rig's high beams cut narrow tunnels through the flurries, and every few minutes, the wind screamed across the cab like a living thing. After an hour, I saw the marker for mile 212. I slowed, scanning for the stranded hauler. Nothing but white, empty road. I key my mic. "Greg, this is Nate from Roadside Recovery. You copy?" Only static. Then, faintly through the crackle, I heard a voice. Yeah, I see you coming up." His voice was shaky, distorted, like it was coming through water. I scanned the roadside again. No headlights, no shadows, no sign of movement. I rolled another half mile before spotting tire tracks cutting off to the right. Deep grooves leading into a service trail used for snowplows. I turned carefully, following them. The snow got thicker, the road narrower. Then, out of the darkness, my lights hit a tanker truck half buried in snow. Its hazard lights were flashing weakly, casting red glows that pulsed against the storm. "Greg!" I shouted as I parked behind him and stepped out. The cold hit like knives, cutting through my gloves in seconds. I trudged up to the cab, door shut, windows frosted over. When I yanked the handle, it opened with a creak. The cab was empty. The driver's seat was covered in a thin layer of frost, like it had been left open to the cold for hours. A thermos lay on the floor, frozen solid. The keys were still in the ignition, but the battery was dead. I looked around. No footprints, no signs of struggle, nothing. Just snow drifting slowly into the truck's open door. I tried the radio again. Dispatch, this is Unit 7. I found the rig at mile 212, but the driver's gone. Repeat, no sign of Greg Halpern. The line hissed for a moment before the dispatcher's voice came back. Quiet, almost strained. Copy that. Are you sure you're at 212? That call came in nearly 2 hours ago. State troopers said they already found the truck empty and cleared it. My stomach dropped. Say again. They towed it down to Fairbanks about an hour ago. No driver was ever located. I turned slowly toward the tanker. The snow was piling high against its tires. The hazard lights still blinked red through the storm. Dispatch, I said carefully. I'm looking right at it. Static. Then silence. I tried a mic again, but it was dead. Even my backup radio wouldn't power on. That's when I noticed the door to the trailer was slightly open. Just an inch, swinging gently with the wind. Every instinct told me to get back in my truck and go, but I couldn't leave a scene without checking. So I grabbed my flashlight and stepped closer. The beam flicked weakly through the snow. When I reached the trailer door, I heard something, a faint, rhythmic tapping from inside. Not mechanical, almost like someone knocking from the other side. I swallowed hard and pulled the latch. The metal screeched as it lifted, and the door swung open. The inside was dark, empty, except for a set of boot prints frozen in the ice-covered floor. They led about halfway in, then stopped. Just stopped, like whoever made them vanished mid-step. My flashlight flickered. The tapping sound grew louder, now coming from beneath the tanker. I crouched down, pointed the beam under the chassis. A man's face stared back at me through the snow, eyes wide open, skin pale blue, lips frozen mid-breath. It was Greg. I jumped back, nearly slipping. He was wedged under the truck, like he'd crawled there to escape something. His parka was ripped along one arm, and his gloves were gone. I tried to move closer, but the beam of my flashlight hit something else. A second set of boot prints, fresh and deeper, leading away from the tanker into the trees. And they weren't Greg's. The size was smaller. Barefoot impressions pressed into the snow. I stood frozen, staring into the black tree line. The wind howled again, carrying a sound with it. A low hum, almost like a person breathing through clenched teeth. That was enough. I backed away, climbed into my tow rig, and floored it until I hit the main highway. My hand was shaking so badly, I could barely hold the wheel. About 20 minutes later, my radio flickered back to life. Dispatch again. Nate, you copy? We lost you for a bit. I told her everything. The truck, Greg, the body, the prints. She went quiet, then said, Nate, Greg's body was already recovered yesterday morning, near the Yukon River crossing. You sure you didn't stop at the wrong rig? I didn't even answer. I just kept driving. When I got back to living good, I checked my logs and GPS tracker. It showed no detour at mile 212. No service trail. No stop. Just a straight drive north, then back again. But here's the thing that still keeps me up at night. The next morning, when I walked out to my tow truck, I saw something on my front bumper. A frozen glove, torn down the seam. I've kept it since then, not out of superstition, but because I need to remember what I saw. I tell myself it was exhaustion, cold, and bad luck mixing together that night. But sometimes when I drive past mile 212, my radio crackles with faint static, and I hear a shaky voice say, yeah, I see you coming up. I don't answer anymore. I just keep driving. I've been driving long hauls in Alaska for more than 2 decades. You get used to the silence up here, the kind that hums in your ears when you kill the engine and realize there's nothing for 50 miles in any direction. My name's Russell, and I want to tell you about something that happened to me 2 winters ago on Route 8, near Cantwell. I'm not trying to scare anyone. I just can't stop thinking about it. Some nights, I hear that same sound again and wonder if anyone else ever heard it. It started during a run from Anchorage to Fairbanks, a route I knew like the back of my hand. The company I worked for specialized in late-night deliveries, so I usually drove between 10 p.m. and sunrise. That night, the temperature had dropped below -30, and the snow on the road glittered under the moonlight like broken glass. I've been driving almost 6 hours without a break when my CB radio started picking up faint static. I tapped the dial, thinking it was interference from the mountains. But then, through the noise, I heard it. a voice distant and thin. "Anyone there? This is Truck 19. It didn't sound like the usual chatter. There was fear in that voice. I grabbed the mic. "Truck 19, this is Russell," I copy. "You in trouble?" The static cracked, then cleared. "I can't see the road anymore. I think I missed the turn. Battery's dying." I checked my map. The only turn for miles was a small logging trail off Route 8, about 20 minutes north of me. I asked, "Where exactly are you? Can you see any signs or markers?" No reply, just the hiss of dead air. I tried calling again. Nothing. Now, I've been around long enough to know when someone's in real danger on these roads. A stalled rig out there at night. No heat, no backup. It doesn't take long for a man to freeze. So I pulled over and radioed dispatch. They said no one on record was using the handle Truck 19. No active runs, no permits, no recent transmissions. I told them I'd check it out anyway. When I turned onto that logging trail, the snow was untouched. No tire marks, no tracks. The trees leaned heavy over the road, their branches weighed down by frost. The headlights threw long shadows that swayed like slow-moving ghosts. A mile in, I saw something. A faint red glow ahead, pulsing in the dark. At first, I thought it was taillights. I drove closer, heart hammering, breath fogging the glass. And that's when I saw it. A truck, half buried in snow, tilted at an angle against a drift. Its engine was dead, and its hazard lights blinked weakly, casting red flashes over the snow. The number painted on the door read, 19. I climbed down and walked up to the cab, crunching through knee-deep snow. The door was open. Inside, the dashboard was cracked, the seats coated with frost. No one was there. The driver's logbook lay open on the passenger seat, pages stiff with ice. The last entry read, February 3rd, 2:41 a.m., heading north from Cantwell. Heard something following the trailer. We'll stop to check. That was it. The clock on the dashboard was frozen at 2:58 a.m. I looked around with my flashlight. No footprints, no signs of life, just the quiet hiss of wind through the trees. I was about to radio dispatch when my CB crackled again. "Russell," it was the same voice. "Don't come closer." My chest went cold. I turned in a slow circle, scanning the tree line. The snow shifted under the wind, but there was no one there. "Truck 19, where are you?" I said into the mic, "Do you copy? Are you hurt?" The response came after a long, static-filled pause. "Look under the trailer." I didn't want to, but I did. The beam from my flashlight cut through the snow and hit a set of drag marks under the tanker. Long, shallow grooves leading back into the trees. They weren't tire marks or tool scrapes. They looked like someone had been pulled through the snow. The trail stopped about 30 feet from the truck, ending in a smooth, circular patch of ice. No blood, no prints, nothing. I backed up slowly, every instinct screaming at me to leave. But as I climbed back into my rig, the radio came alive one last time. "You found me." It wasn't fear anymore in the voice. It was something else, something tired. "Been trying to call, can't leave this road." Then silence. I drove out of there as fast as the snow would let me. When I hit the main highway again, I reported everything. The truck, the voice, the location. A week later, a state trooper called me back. He said they found the truck at the spot I described, but not the way I'd seen it. It wasn't stuck in the snow anymore. It was burnt out, nothing left but the frame and a melted logbook. They ran the VIN. That rig had crashed almost 12 years earlier on the same route. Driver died on impact. His name was Eli Carter. Handle, Truck 19. I didn't know what to say. That night, I sat in my cab for a long time, just listening to the hum of the heater and the slow ticking of the dashboard clock. The silence outside pressed against the windows like a living thing. Sometimes, when I drive past Route 8, I turn my CB down low, but I still hear faint static bleeding through the speakers. And every so often, when the signal clears, I swear I hear that same voice whispering through the noise. I can't see the road anymore. I don't know what really happened out there. Maybe it was a glitch, or an echo, or just a tired man's imagination in the middle of a frozen night. But it felt real enough that I still keep the dial tuned to Channel 19, just in case someone calls again. If you made it this far, thank you for riding with me through this journey of true Alaskan trucker horror stories. If you enjoyed this series, don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment, and share your own story. You never know, your experience might just become the next story we tell here. Stay safe out there, and keep your